Hello everyone, I wanted to talk a little bit today about the Avatar The Last Airbender graphic novels. And I wanted to talk about them for a couple of reasons. First of all, I know these graphic novels are fairly well known about in the Avatar The Last Airbender fandom, but there are still a lot of people who are fans of the TV show who haven't read them. And if you are a fan of the TV show at all, in my opinion, you really do owe yourself to check them out, because they are very good. And I also think that these graphic novels are really an excellent example of how to do a sequel series right. And since a lot of sequel series are kind of being done not so right now, in my opinion, I think it's kind of interesting to look at that. A bit of background first. I got on the Avatar fan train a little late. It first came out when I was a teenager, and I assumed it was just some kids show and passed it over without much thought. Then years later, when I was in college, a friend of mine told me, "Hey, you've got to check out this show. It's wicked, groovy, awesome." I'm pretty sure that's word for word what she said. So I said okay, and I asked if I could borrow her DVDs. She let me, and I blew through the whole series pretty quickly. It really got me hooked. It was obvious the writers respected the audience's intelligence, and it was a show that people of any age could enjoy. Cut to a year or two later, I was in my local Best Buy, and they had the complete series on DVD for a pretty good price. And I'm the kind of person that if I'm really like something, if I'm really a fan of it, I like to have a hard copy. So I figured, hey, good time to pick one up. There were a few box sets of the series on the shelf, and one of them, and only one of them, had a little copy of Part 1 of The Promise, the first graphic novel in the series. It was the exact same price as all the others, so of course I wanted to get the one with the freebie. That copy is still the one I own, and if you look at it compared to Part 2 and 3, you'll notice it's actually like a little pocket edition, sort of. And I'm not actually sure if these smaller copies are too common. I haven't really seen them around except for this one. At that point, the only thing I knew about the Avatar The Last Airbender graphic novels was that they existed. The TV series ended with a minor plot thread still hanging, and I remember seeing an ad somewhere for the graphic novels that said, "The adventure continues," which sounds swell, but my Silent Hill 4 manual has an ad for the Silent Hill Dying Inside comic in it, and that was one of the worst things ever made by a human being. So you never know what you're gonna get with these comic tie-ins. Fortunately, The Promise turned out to be really good, and I ended up reading all of them through Smoke and Shadows, I think was the last one. I only own the first 2 arcs, though. The Avatar graphic novels have all had the same team working on them, which is probably why they've been so consistently good. The artist is Guri Hiru, which is actually a team of 2 Japanese women, and the art is for the most part a very good adaptation of the visual style of the show to the comics page. There is this one facial expression that pops up occasionally that I think is kind of derpy looking, but other than that, the art is expressive, crisp, colorful, and portrays the action well. Some of the page spreads look outright fantastic. The writer is Gene Luen Yang, and he serves as an example that it's not always only the original creator of a series who can do it right. It's obvious that he had a lot of love for this world and these characters. In fact, I would argue that Yang's sequel series is better than the original creators. But that's a whole nother can of worms I'm not getting into in this video. What I wanted to focus on was what makes the graphic novels such good sequels, and that comes down, I think, to 3 key things: continuity, world building, and character development. With any sequel to a story that was originally written to be self-contained, the big question that has to be tackled is, now what? The main motivation in the Avatar TV show was to defeat the Fire Lord. By the end of the last episode, he's defeated. The main conflict is over. So now what? Most people's first instinct would be to write up a new villain. The TV show revolved around defeating a villain. So clearly, the sequel series needs a new villain for the gang to go on an epic quest to defeat, just like in TV show. Right? And herein lies the genius of Gene Luen Yang. He didn't do that. Most of the arcs don't even have a villain, really. In The Promise, Zuko, now Fire Lord, agrees to relocate all the Fire Nation citizens who are living in the Earth Kingdom as part of the new peace agreement. But when the people of the oldest colony protest because they've been living there for 100 years and have even been intermarrying with the Earth Kingdom residents, Zuko changes his mind. This angers the Earth King and his generals because in their view, this is land that was invaded and stolen from the Earth Kingdom. So war threatens to break out again when peace has just barely begun. And neither side is depicted as the bad guy. They both have a point. Of course, a compromise is eventually reached because this series still has a mostly optimistic tone, but it's not portrayed as a problem with an easy answer or black and white morals. This arc also relates this conflict to Aang and Katara's relationship and explores something that was never addressed in the TV show: how segregated this world was before the war. Since Aang and Katara are openly dating now, Katara starts to sympathize with the Fire Nation colonists, wondering how an airbender and a waterbender can have a relationship if the four nations have to remain separate. World building, character development. In the search, Zuko finally goes looking for his mom, with the rest of the gang accompanying him, except Toph, who continues her TV show tradition of being the most screwed out of screen time main character. Azula is the closest thing to an antagonist here, but while she's a dangerous loose cannon, she's not directly opposing the main characters like in the TV show. In fact, she works with them at some points. And Azula arguably goes through the most character development of anyone in this arc, more even than Zuko. And we get to see and explore parts of the Fire Nation we've never seen before and learn more about their relationships with the spirits. World building, character development. In the Rift, the gang goes to a sacred air nomad site, only to find out that some Earth Kingdom citizens have started a factory and opened a mine there. This causes friction between Aang, who is horrified by this violation of ancient traditions, and Toph, who on top of thinking the new technology is wicked groovy, has heavy disdain for tradition due to her issues with her overbearing parents. And then they learn something dangerous might be buried down below that the traditions were put in place to not disturb. Smoke and Shadows comes closest to having a traditional villain when Zuko has to deal with a terrorist organization called the New Ozai Society, but even that's not as straightforward as it seems. Do you see what I'm getting at here? I love a good villain, I definitely do, but by breaking out of that mold, Yang was able to take all the other elements of the show and do something new with them. There's more moral complexity and the characters don't have an obvious end goal anymore, but it still feels like Avatar thanks to the consistent characters, setting, and tone, and it doesn't get boring because the characters and setting, while they are consistent, aren't static. The characters are still learning and growing, and the world is constantly changing and developing in ways that build on what the TV show established. All of this is called story progression. It used to be taken for granted, but let me compare the Avatar graphic novels with a few popular movie franchises from recent years. First, Star Wars, because there just aren't enough YouTubers talking about Star Wars. It's only been like 98% of YouTube content for the past 6 months.
I gotta pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
But as much as I hate to talk about Star Wars, the sequel series is too good an example of something that I wanted to talk about for me to pass up. It's something that's been around for a long time, but has become a lot more prevalent in recent years. Story Regression. The original Star Wars trilogy was about a plucky group of rebel fighters battling against a powerful, tyrannical, militarily dominant empire with a fetish for black and white uniforms. By the end of the series, the rebels have won several big victories against the empire, destroyed 2 of their superweapons, and killed their leader. The rebels have pretty much won. So 30 years into the future, you'd expect the galaxy to look quite a bit different, right? At the start of the sequel series, a plucky group of #resistance fighters are battling against a powerful, tyrannical, militarily dominant First Order with a fetish for black and white uniforms. They're functionally identical to the Rebellion and the Empire. Even the spaceships are exactly the same except for the paint jobs. Nothing has changed. Everything is right back where A New Hope started. It's not just the world or how the plot is about blowing up a giant laser ball either. The characters all seem to fill similar roles to characters in the original trilogy, too. There's the plucky, naive main character from the desert planet, the gunslinging rogue, the wise mentor, the bad guy in black armor with the weird voice, the bad guy in cool armor who's totally useless, the robot that talks in bleeping noises, and the wimp who doesn't want to be there and has a homoerotic friendship with another character. The old characters have all regressed too. At the end of the original trilogy, Leia and Han had hooked up and Luke had grown into a confident Jedi Knight. At the start of this series, Leia and Han are broken up, Han's back to smuggling, Leia's back to fighting another war, and Luke has become a grumpy hobo. They're all old and miserable because everything they worked to build has fallen apart. Then one by one they die without accomplishing much. Except Princess Leia, who's not coming back because her actress died for real. Enjoy your fun popcorn space adventure.
For the Jedi to end.
But Knowles, you say? This is old ground. Everyone already knows The Force Awakens was incredibly derivative. The point isn't that it's derivative. The point is that because it's so derivative, when you stop and think about it, it becomes incredibly depressing. And another point is that this is not just a Star Wars problem. Star Wars was just the most obvious about it. Now, when it comes to story regression, Terminator 3 was much more efficient. It demolished the ending of Terminator 2 in 2 lines. Judgment Day is inevitable, it was just delayed. Don't think too hard about how the logic of this works. John and Sarah Connor and the T-800 didn't save humanity, they just caused a delay of a few years before everyone got nuked. Not quite as gratifying, but look at all the guns shooting and stuff getting smashed. And then, because that wasn't enough, a soft reboot prequel sequel was released with very questionable spelling in the title, rendering all the other movies in the series, including the only 2 that make this series more notable than Lady Terminator or Russian Terminator, completely non-canon. But the softcore prequel sequel reshoot doesn't actually explain the basic premises of the series, so you still have to watch the other movies. Everyone loved it. Which brings us to J.J. Abrams' Star Trek 2009, which pioneered the semi-soft-serve prequel-sequel reboot. The writers of that movie realized that by making time travel a plot point, they could completely ignore all the continuity that those nerds had been invested in for so long and rewrite the entire universe on a whim. Really drives home the pointlessness of being invested in a fandom. Might as well just tell me to go outside while you're at it. I don't want to go outside, it's cold out there right now. Then they made the sequel to the movie, and sure enough, in came the recycled plots and substandard rehashes of the series' most popular moments. Even Marvel has indulged in this to a lesser extent. Tony Stark says he's not going to be Iron Man anymore, then in the next movie he's being Iron Man, with little to no provocation. A massively overpowered character is introduced, and then is mostly ignored or kept in the background so he doesn't instantly solve all the problems in the movie's plot. In fairness, it's gotta be kinda tough writing the sequel to something that some hack already messed up, but if you don't want to actually continue the story, why make a sequel at all? Why not make a reboot, or an original movie even? Oh, right, because while it used to be taken for granted that even bad sequels would continue the story, Hollywood knows that isn't really the point of a sequel. The point is to squeeze more green milk out of that weathered teat. Sequels can play to people's nostalgia for something they enjoyed without running into that, if the original was so good, what's the point question that reboots always get hit with. Because sequels are supposed to show us something new. But making something new that still fits in with the old thing we liked is hard, and Hollywood hacks have realized they can keep recovering old ground endlessly if they add just enough new excuses to trick the audience. It doesn't always work, though. Sometimes the pressure gets to be too much and everything just snaps, and you get The Last Jedi. For the record, I don't hate The Last Jedi. In fact, while I think it is a mess of a movie, I appreciate it on a sort of meta level. The Last Jedi is a movie where most of the characters blunder around, unsure of what to do, and everyone who tries to accomplish something worthwhile gets punished for it. In the end, all the narrative threads have been destroyed except for the bad guys vaguely wanting to destroy everything and the good guys vaguely wanting to stop them. It's a perfect commentary on the devolution of massive cinematic universes.
Outer space has gone crazy. I'm gonna use this to destroy it all.
Why does everyone blame me for everything? What did I ever do to you? You want me to kill myself right here, right now? Is that it? Will that make you happy?
It was probably unintentional, but it's certainly interesting. Anyway, if you get anything out of my deranged ramblings, it's that the Avatar The Last Airbender graphic novels are really good, and add more depth to the series they're continuing, which is sadly kind of rare these days. You should check them out if you like the series, whether you enjoyed its TV sequel or not. And if you don't like or disagree with what I said, remember, I'm on the internet, so I'm probably right. Unless someone who's more popular on the internet disagrees with me. That's just the way it works. You can help me be more right by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Or you can tell me how dumb I am and that I need to go back to flipping burgers in the comments section. Either way works. Bye now.